Students at Oberlin College are very much concerned with what one of the cafes is serving its students. Now, there's lots of talk about cultural appropriation, but I'm unclear as to whether or not this story falls under that category, so we'll have a discussion about it. Now, the students at this school are concerned because there are all sorts of ethnic foods being served as authentic when in reality they're not authentic at all. There's sushi that's being served that's not very sushi-esque. There is Vietnamese food being served that is not actual authentic Vietnamese food. And so students who are from those cultures are worried about these foods misrepresenting what their actual cuisine is all about. One of those students is Tomoyo Joshi. He's a junior at Oberlin College, and here's what he has to say. When you're cooking a country's dish for other people, including ones who have never tried the original dish before, you're also representing the meaning of the dish as well as its culture. So if people not from that heritage take food, modify it, and serve it as authentic, it's appropriative. The undercooked rice and lack of fresh fish is disrespectful. Now, this is specifically about Bon Appetit, which is one place on campus where people get food. And apparently, this cafe is doing its best to kind of try to, represent different ethnicities and different cultures. But apparently they're failing and they're upsetting the students. Now, it's interesting that the students are complaining about this particular cafe because I think this cafe is representative of the United States of America, where all foods that are supposed to be authentic, that are passed off as authentic, aren't really authentic at all. I mean, take pizza, for instance. Pizza, which is originally from Italy, is nothing like what it was originally meant to be, right? Domino's is not pizza. It's a U.S. interpretation of an Italian food. But is that appropriative? Is that being disrespectful? I'm curious what you guys think about this. Let me start with you, Maytha. Make your point.
One, is it culturally appropriative? I would say no. Two, is it offensive? Yes, absolutely. For the first point, like you said, it's everywhere. I mean, all these foods, sushi is everywhere. I've had bad sushi in so many places. I don't know what authentic sushi tastes like. I've never been to Japan. But I will say from my own cultural experience, hummus. I have never tried a hummus in the US, and I know this is gonna sound very patronizing and arrogant, but I really have never tried a hummus that tastes close to authentic in the US. I wait till I go outside of the country to the Middle East to eat it, or I make it myself, because what tends to happen, and I think in most of these cases, is that market economics comes in and people skimp on some of the key ingredients that are probably more readily available in those countries. So for example, you brought up the issue of pizza in Italy. Mozzarella, they always use fresh buffalo mozzarella.
Yeah.
You're not gonna find that in a Domino's pizza. Why? You paid like $10 for two full pizzas.
That shit's good though. I'm keeping it real, right? I love Domino's.
Yeah, but I think the language of cultural appropriation is very heavy-handed and makes people dismissive of your claim.
Yes.
And so of course on-campus dining is gonna be horrible, but I do think that they could, Yelp shame that campus dinery. And I'm just also personally offended when there's bad food that's trying to represent a certain country.
Yeah, I get the perspective of the students because you don't want your culture to be misrepresented by terrible food, right? But at the same time, I think that the vast majority of people in the US have an understanding that the food that's being passed off as authentic is not really authentic. So if I'm gonna go to a Mexican restaurant in, I don't know, Northern California or Illinois, I don't know, whatever, random places, I'm not gonna think right off the bat, this is gonna be authentic Mexican food. You have to be a little more skeptical of it. But I get it, you don't want your country or your culture or your ethnicity, any of that, your values to be misrepresented. And I think that's what these students are trying to get at. I don't think it's cultural appropriation. And I agree with you that it kind of minimizes actual cases of cultural appropriation when you point to things like this. But Sandra, what do you think? Make your point.
Oh, okay. So I think three things. One, I totally get feeling embarrassed. I mean, this is Ohio. I mean, this is the Midwest. I mean, it's fascinating to me because, yeah, the Vietnamese student, I'm sure, like, if I were in another country and my food was being passed off and nobody knew about my culture, I'd be so embarrassed.
Yes.
Just like, oh my God. So one, I get it. If there's an issue on campus of international students not really getting a chance to be understood for their culture, and if there's some on-campus tension there, that should be addressed.
Yes.
In terms of the language, yeah, don't call it authentic or traditional. Like, don't lie to people, or like that's tacky. That's just tacky.
I
right?
agree with you. And I think that honestly, what these students want more than anything is good food. I mean, a lot of them are kind of forced into eating this food, especially if they're living on campus and they're, part of the meal program on campus. So they want something better. But I get the cultural issues with it, and I get the quality issues with it. And at the same time, everyone needs to calm down. 10-2, as Cenk would say.
In terms of the appropriation thing, one thing that I think is important to remember when you're analyzing things for appropriation is what is a culture like mocked or made fun of for, and then when you as a dominant culture take it on, you're honored for. Like when white women wear cornrows and you're so edgy, but if a black person wears it, you're like, oh, you need to take care of your hair better. That kind of thing.
Or we won't hire you either.
Right, exactly. And then you lose out on employment. That kind of stuff. That effed.
And that happens all the time. And I think that's a criticism of the current system that we're living in and we're dealing with, and that system should be criticized. I think oftentimes when cultural appropriation comes up, the person who's wearing the cornrows is demonized, when I don't think that's necessarily the best strategy in dealing with it, because then you're turning someone off to a legitimate problem because they feel like they're being targeted unnecessarily, right? The system is the problem. When employers refuse black women a job because they're wearing their hair naturally, it's the employer's fault. It's not some random white girl's fault because she likes to wear her hair in cornrows. At least that's the way I think about it.
Are Japanese students being made fun of for sushi? I have no experience. I don't know.
Everyone loves sushi. Who doesn't love sushi other than vegans and vegetarians? But come on, it's delicious. All right, so here's the question. What's your favorite food native to your heritage, Maytha?
So I'm very, very biased. I think Syria, especially the city that my father's from, Aleppo, has the best food in the world. And thankfully, because of your people, the Armenians brought over their cuisine, and there's incredible fusion there. So one of the dishes is called muhammara, which is, do you know it?
I think so. Describe it.
So it is a crushed red pepper with pomegranate syrup.
Yes.
And crushed walnut
Yes.
dip. Oh my
So
God.
good.
I want to appropriate that so
It's
hard.
so good.
Yeah. Because what
I
they
want to
have-
appropriate that
that's
so hard. It's my
hard.
favorite phrase in this entire show.
Or you can eat it. You can also eat it. You can also eat it. It's available at Carousel. They do a pretty good job at it.
Carousel.
Yeah,
Random
Carousel.
plugs in this video. Domino's, Carousel. If you're in LA, Carousel has some of the best Middle Eastern Armenian food imaginable.
Yes, totally. Oh, so good.
So good. What about you, Sandra?
Chicken adobo. So the Filipinos have some questionable dishes. I'm first to say it. However, the chicken adobo, that's a party favorite no matter where. It's vinegar and bay leaves and pepper and some oils and garlic. And you just simmer chicken in it for a long time, and it takes on this tangy, delicious, and soy sauce, very important. This tangy flavor that you just want to like bathe in it. You want to appropriate that everywhere.
Oh my God, that sounds so good. I'm so hungry right now. Armenians have actually appropriated a lot of dishes from around the region that the country's in, right? So a lot of Armenian cuisine is influenced by Syrian cuisine, by Turkish cuisine. But I would say that my favorite Armenian dish is actually a soup called sipas. And it's like a yogurt soup. Hold on, I know it sounds kind of weird. With rice and crushed dried mint leaves. Oh. It's so good.
We make that too. I
Really?
forget. Yeah.
It's so good. I'm like obsessed with that soup.
So yummy.
My mom makes it during the wintertime, obviously, because it's a soup. And yesterday, she texted me while I was at work, and she's like, I made sopas, you should come over. And she lives kind of far, so usually during the week I don't do that, but I was really tempted, just to eat that soup. Anyway, guys, comment in the section below and tell us what type of food native to your culture are you a big fan of? Describe it, make us hungry. We're hungry people. And also tell us what you think about Oberlin College. Do you think that these students are justifiably airing their grievances, or do you think that this is a questionable criticism of Bon Appetit Cafe? Comment in the section below. We'll see you soon. And remember, never be afraid to make your point.